Clive James, thank you very much for allowing us into your home. And I suppose the thing where I have to ask about first of is, how are you?
Well, I should say that I'm fine, because here I am, blessed with your company and talking away 10 to the dozen, but the fact is that I'm in pretty bad shape. What's amazing is that I'm still here. I was scheduled to conk out much earlier than this because I've got various ailments, one of them leukemia. But the leukemia is being held at bay by marvellous drugs. And so I don't really know when I'm going to conk out, but I am going to conk out. And with any luck, I'll conk out right now, and you've really got a story. So let's do a deal.
How are you coping with it all? How have you been coping? Because was it 2010 you were diagnosed, and I think at that stage you felt you only had a couple of years.
Very beginning of 2010,
How have you coped with it, with your impending mortality?
Well, I had to think hard about whether I would just quit altogether and lie down, or else get on with it. And I decided on the second alternative. And since I'm not doing anything else except write, I've ended up writing quite a lot.
And writing brilliantly and writing really well.
Well, I like that last part. You can say that again if you wish. I think I'm writing at my best, but writers always think that. You can't trust them. And as one of the great Irish literary figures, in my view, Flann O'Brien, he was very good on writers' egos because he spotted straight away that they were all ego, that that's what they were. I do love Flann O'Brien. It's a great blessing for a country to have that kind of literary background, I think. There are a few Australians who could do that, but not many.
Do you have more wisdom, do you think, in your writing at present?
Oh, sure, but I needed to. I was an unusually unwise young man, and I stayed an unusually unwise young man until quite recently. And impending death straightened me up a bit. And yes, I'm a lot wiser. And also, I've got a lot more to write about, because if you live those few extra years, you can do a bit more looking back, and there's time to think about things too. And no, I've got plenty of new material to work on, and I have a much more mature view of my life than I had earlier.
In what way?
Well, before I got sick, I was very, very energetic, and I did an awful lot at terrific speed. And I never had time to think about it. And now I can reflect. And it adds a whole new level to my work, I think. But I do emphasize that I'm very lucky. I can afford this kind of joke. I can afford to talk about the work I might do, which I will. I'll inflict that on you quite soon with the next question. But I can only do that because I'm not in pain. I've got the lucky version of what I've got. And if you spend a lot of time around hospitals, you see plenty of people who are not so lucky. And I'm very aware of my blessings.
Are you in any way resentful, though, of the illnesses that
Sorry, could you say that again?
Are you in any way resentful of the condition that
The reason I ask you to say things again is that I'm almost entirely deaf. And since people have to come to see me and I can't go and see them, some quite illustrious figures apart from yourself come in here. The ex-Prime Minister of Australia, John Howard, was here only a few months ago, sitting right where you're sitting, and interviewing me for a show he was doing about Australia. And since he's quite deaf too, it was a real shouting match. And I'm told it's quite amusing. We couldn't hear each other, so we still have no idea of what we said. I do like to see you laugh. I do like to see people laugh and still occasionally be the cause of that. That was the best part of my career. And in a way, it still goes on.
But the question still, are you in any way resentful about what actually happened to you? Do you actually get depressed in any way about it?
There's no one to be resentful about except myself. I don't think smoking too much gave me leukemia, but it certainly gave me emphysema. And I'm resentful that I was so stupid. But that's a good subject, isn't it? And I still talk about my follies all the time. They're not just a good subject, they're true. It's true. I was an unusually stupid young man.
In what way? I mean, you had a very full life. You had, well, I think many people would be envious of all the things that you actually have achieved in your writing, in your television, in your poetry. I mean, surely that's something, rather than describing as follies, that you should be proud of what you've achieved in your life.
I'm proud of my works individually. I'm of the private opinion that they're all marvellous. But it's not very comely or convincing to praise yourself. And I prefer to talk about my failures and follies. It's better material.
I was very struck by your having read Unreliable Memoirs again. Your upbringing, the circumstances in which your father died must have been so traumatic for your mother, let alone for yourself.
Yes, people keep getting the circumstances wrong when they write about me, and it's my fault. I don't tell them much. It's still, for me, it's a big and sensitive subject. But briefly, he went away to fight, and he was captured at Singapore, and he spent the war in a Japanese prison camp in Japan. He's often described as being in Changi or on the railway. No, neither of those things is true. He was in Changi only briefly, and then he was in Japan and got right through the war and came out of it alive. And then the Americans, with typical generosity and unfortunately with typical impetuosity, thought they'd do the Australian prisoners in Japan a favour and fly them home instead of them having to wait for a ship. And my father was on one of the people in a B-24 that got caught by a typhoon and crashed in Taiwan. And what made it dreadful is that we were expecting him home. He'd survived the war. The letters had been exchanged. Coming home. Big day. It never happened. This disaster happened instead, and I was there to watch my mother take the news. And it's still now, it deprives me of speech. You can tell. You can tell I've run out of things to say. And eventually I write them. In my book, Unreliable Memoirs, which you kindly just mentioned, there's a brief reference to it. And I could have written more, but I'm still dealing with it. And really my whole life, my whole career, everything springs from that one dreadful moment.
I was fascinated as well, though, by your childhood and the amount of reading that you did, the lifelong habit that you established from reading. But can you imagine if you had been a child who'd grown up with television? What would that have deprived you of? Would you have developed the same love and passion for reading?
I think I would, because my mother was convinced that books were more important than TV. Back in the 1940s, that was a decision you could still make. And later on, people started to live in the television world. I think the real difference, if I hadn't been brought up with books and as a reader, is I probably would have gone to jail, because I had no other gifts. Except a gift for sort of certain sly deviousness, and so I got lucky again. There's only really one thing I can do, and it's all based on writing. I'm writing right now. I'm pondering your question and writing the answer in my head before I say it. It's an old habit, and I got quite slick at it after about 50 or 60 years. But no, it's all writing.
But you also deliver, because I'm sure there are many of our listeners who remember you, particularly from Clive James on television during the 1980s, doing the deadpan delivery of the excellent jokes, introducing all the little bits and pieces that you used to accumulate from around the world.
I got better at imitating myself, I think is the answer. I learned all the theatrical tricks you need in order to project your own personality. I can't project anybody else's personality. I can't even mimic. And I admire people who can, but I'm quite good at saying what I have to say, keeping my voice up at the end of the sentence instead of letting it sink, articulating so I can be understood. That's a set of skills, and one acquires them. And I'm always stunned by writers who go on stage at literary festivals, read out their own work, and they just don't get it. They're not even good at being themselves. I suppose they lack a histrionic streak, the implication being that I've got one, but it's only for being myself. I'm doing it right now.
Did you enjoy being on television, though? Did you enjoy the attention that you got from television? You used to interview a lot of celebrities, but you became a celebrity yourself.
No, I always hated it, and I'm glad about the fact that it brings the rest of my work to market, as it were. But I'd simply loathe the idea of being written about, my private life being written about. It's part of the package. It's almost impossible to avoid, except by behaving extremely well. The Pope, you may have noticed, gets quite a good press in Ireland. No, I didn't enjoy that part, but I actually enjoyed the process of television and radio. I love broadcasting. For one thing, it got me to meet other people, and I'm essentially a fairly solitary character. Nobody believes that because I'm quite merry, but privacy is what I'm best at. And it's lucky because unless you can be alone with yourself, you can't be a writer, not for long. A large part of your working day will be spent alone, and you better be good at that. But the drawback is if you don't meet anyone, your character doesn't build up. And I think it was Stendhal, that well-known Irish broadcaster. He said you can acquire anything in solitude except character. That's quite true. And doing broadcasting got me out of the house, and I met other people, and I became a better man.
You have some surprising interests, though, during your life. I mean, one, for example, at one stage you became very interested in doing motor racing, Grand Prix racing.
Yes. It's a little-known fact that my real name is Jos Verstappen. Did you notice the other day that a 19-year-old won a Grand Prix? That is supposed never to happen, you see, because it discredits the whole business. Some kid can win one of those things. Yeah, but I was a natural-born car racer. It's just that I couldn't drive. I didn't even have a license for a long time, and then one of the TV companies in Britain had the inspired idea of entering me for a celebrity saloon car challenge race at the Adelaide Grand Prix one year, and it was a great. And I'm making a show about it. Clive James racing driver, great idea, except that I didn't have a license. I couldn't drive, so I got taught to drive in a hurry, and I was taught by Sterling Moss. And with the result that when I went for my test, the person doing the testing was very startled to find me making racing gear changes, hurtling into corners at 100 miles an hour. So anyway, and I got the license, and I got a competition license, and drove the race. We made the documentary. Then back in England, I started driving on the road, and my own daughter sat me down. After one trip, I took it's every daddy's dream job is to take the daughters and all her gear to university for the new term. And I delivered her at university after driving her across the country, and she sat me down and started giving me the reasons why I should never drive again. And the best reason was I was a dreamer. I paid no real attention to the road, and I was a danger to myself and her and others. And I listened, and I realized she was right, and I quit. I am not fit to drive, but I would love to. But on the other hand, I'm not fit to be a high diver, and I would love to. And lots of other things.
One of the surprises, I suppose, as well, I was reading your piece in The New Yorker recently about Game of Thrones. And this, again, surprised me that Game of Thrones would be one of the box sets that you have taken to.
It surprises me because I took one look at the box and thought, I'm never gonna watch that. Are you kidding? What do I care about magic swords and dragons? But it hooked me thoroughly. And don't tell me what happens next, because I'm still watching the boxes as they come out. And although you can watch the current series on your computer if you want to, I don't want to get ahead of myself. So I'm still waiting for the day when the next season is issued in a box, the way it should be. They've done it well. What they've done is taken you back to a pre-legal condition of mankind where there is nothing but danger. And life can sometimes be a bit like that. You tend to feel like that just after you get sick, seriously sick. You realize all bets are off, and it's a raw and savage world. And no, I love Game of Thrones, although it's uncanny how some of the characters I like least are unexpectedly executed at the end of the season.
I think, though, most of the characters do get killed, don't they?
Yes, yeah. I've never been a fan of Sean Bean or Sheen Bean. It's not his fault. It's just that I saw too many movies in which he was the villain, and the hero wiped him out, and I kind of expected that. But so I didn't find it that I grieved for very long when he went. But I'm being unfair to a good actor here. But actors know that they get trapped by the expectancies that build up around them. And the trouble with Game of Thrones, with Sean Bean's role, is they building him up as a good man. And unless we're real fans of a series like Sharp, we know that Sean Bean isn't built to be the hero. He's built to be the man the hero destroys. I can talk about it like this for ages, and in my forthcoming book I do. And I'm unfair to everyone.
Apart from Game of Thrones, which have been your favourite box sets of recent years? I'm actually probably going to direct you in one of my own favourites, which I think I'm on my third run of at present, this time with my teenage daughters watching with me, The West Wing.
Well, my family is united in their obsession with The West Wing. Everyone in the family has watched it at least 3 times, the whole thing. And I'm a big admirer of the guy who created it, Aaron Sorkin. And it's got everything for The West Wing. And I could go into detail, but we would be here forever. But I think Sorkin has practically saved civilization by making conversation so fashionable. The heroes and heroines of The West Wing all talk well. And he's practically put articulacy back on top as a human attribute. So I love that. And I'm full of theories. In my forthcoming book, we'll show you most of them. But I wouldn't say still that West Wing is my absolute favourite. I think it's probably The Wire. Everything except season 2, where they make the big mistake of shifting the action from town to the docks. And the docks just aren't interesting enough. But see, I've got a theory about that too. I didn't come out of a box set without a theory, except for one box set, which is probably The Following. Have you ever seen The Following?
No, I haven't seen that.
It's Kevin Bacon versus the serial killers, and everyone in The Following is a serial killer. He never meets anybody who isn't, and they end up serial killing each other, and it has no virtues whatsoever. But my younger daughter, who's a fanatic for box sets, she insists on watching it, and I watched it with her, and I got the bug, and now I care. See.
So you stick with it. What about, having mentioned The West Wing, what about the likes of House of Cards?
I loved the British House of Cards very much, and I'm less struck with the American set, although it's smoother. I'm less struck with it because they made the huge mistake of killing off my favourite character, Zoe Barnes, the young female journalist. I think they killed her off too early. I won't say I was watching it for her, but I certainly wasn't. I wasn't. I'm too old for that now. But I was definitely not watching it for Kevin Spacey.
Well, what about Robin Wright?
Robin Wright it's a fabulous performance because she goes from passive aggressive to aggressive to fanatical aggressive without raising her voice. She's fabulous. And there's another season I haven't seen yet. And this conversation is obviously going to be about box sets, so let's settle down and get to the nitty-gritty. It's a question of what haven't you watched? You've watched them all, obviously.
But you've watched so much. I'm envious of how I know that you're at home a lot of the time, apart from going to the hospitals, but clearly you have made an enormous effort over the years to read as much as you possibly can, to watch as much as you possibly can. You have done an enormous amount.
You phrased it very, very kindly, but it's no effort to do exactly what you want, and that's what I've been doing all.
That's a great thing to be able to say, isn't it?
That's what I've done all my life. I'm lucky. I enjoy my work. All my work is an indulgence, and it's just luck again, isn't it?
So then, when do you get time to write?
Well, I write during the day, and then I rest up from that by viewing at night, and so on and on and on. But I'm not doing anything else. For example, I'm not going out. I don't. It's not that I don't go to London anymore. I don't go to Cambridge anymore. It's several hundred yards away down the hill. I'm here. I'm not doing anything else. So although I've got less time and less energy, I've got a much better chance of controlling what I do with my efforts, such as they are. And I hope it'll go on like that. I've got a big book in mind. I don't know when I think might not be able to finish that one, but then that's what I said about a poem I wrote about my little Japanese maple tree. I wrote a poem that got published in the New Yorker and it got quite well known.
I've read it. It was beautiful, beautiful.
Well, it said that come autumn, the lovely tree would burst into red leaf, and that will be the signal for me to go. I'd be gone. And guess what happened? I didn't go. Embarrassingly, I survived, and at least I thought I could count on the fact that the tree would outlive me. And guess what's happened to the tree? It's dying. It got shipped off to the maple clinic during the week, and it may not survive. It's been replaced by another one.
So you're outliving everything.
Well, one hopes one won't outlive all one's friends, but that starts to happen too. Yeah.
We're sitting here at a long rectangular wooden table. You're piled with books and little notes and letters you've written. Is this where you work? Is this where you write?
Yes, this is it. Yeah, everything I write gets written right here where I'm sitting.
Do you write by hand or do you write onto a laptop, or what do you do?
I actually usually start in a notebook, especially if it's a poem. And then at a certain stage, I'll lift it into the computer. But the really fascinating bit is what happens then, because I start rewriting on the computer. It's a very good instrument for rewriting, but it's not quite as good as a notebook. The marvelous thing about a notebook is you can take a fistful of the pages. I wish this was television for just a moment so that you could see me doing it. And you can instantly get to another part of the book. And the computer isn't that instantaneous. You've got to scroll, and it's a bit slow. So I go to the computer late. I like to do my early corrections in the notebook. But I like the mechanical aspect of the task, because really the real business is going on in your head, which is not mechanical at all as far as we know.
How long does it take you to write a poem?
Everyone thinks I do things with indecent haste. But in fact, there's a lot of waiting involved. And the trouble is that while you're waiting to be hit by inspiration, it looks exactly as if you're doing nothing at all. That's why writers are so hard to be married to. My wife could never resist the notion that if I was sitting there staring into space, then I was available to, say, lift a refrigerator upstairs. And I could never talk her out of that. And 50 years went by and it still happens. And also I tend to be up at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning writing something. And that's hard to live with too.
I want to finish by asking you, for those listeners who may not be familiar with you, and unfortunately I have to say we may have some listeners who are wondering, who's this Aussie that you're talking to?
We're working on it now, aren't we?
So if you were to recommend one book that you have written, what would you most like
Of my books?
Of your book? Oh yes, of your books, not anyone else's.
It'd be a question of where to start. And I suppose, although I think my best book is probably Cultural Amnesia, which is a vast survey of modern literature and politics, I think the best place to start is a much more elementary book, which is Unreliable Memoirs, which I wrote about my very early years in Australia. I wrote that in 1979, and it's been in print ever since, and it's been a good friend to me. And I think it's got one immediate attraction, is that although the great disaster of my life, which is the loss of my father, is recorded in the book, it's not the subject. The subject is being young, growing up in a free country, the sunlight, playing in the street, everything that could be free and easy. And I think it's probably still got an immediate appeal. Anyway, I would like the listeners to read that and then go on to read everything else, a list of which will be supplied. And I think you'll find that after this program, there'll be yet another generation of readers. My work will have to stand for itself. Whether any of it will still be here after I'm gone, I can't be sure. Statistics say that most of it will be forgotten because most of any writer is forgotten. But I try hard every time because you can't really know which bit will be remembered. So you better be right on, full on with everything you do.
How would you like to be remembered?
As a writer, I really would. I'm proud and thrilled that I'm a writer, and I'd like to be remembered as one.